So you're like the last living witness to Roswell, is that correct?
Well, probably one of the last. I don't know if I'm the last one or not, but there's not too many of us left, I would think. This happening so many years ago.
What happened?
What happened? Well, interesting. My dad was the Air Force intelligence officer at the air base there at Roswell Army Airfield, and something crashed on the ranch just outside of Roswell, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell. And my dad was dispatched by the base commander, who was Colonel Blanchard, to go out there and collect some residue to see if this was a military aircraft or if it was a V-2 rocket from the White Sands Proving Grounds or whatever was crashed on this rancher's land. And he did go out there along with a CIC agent, Sheridan Cavett, that was the forerunner of the CIA, I believe. And so they picked up representative portions of the debris that was out there. Pardon me. And so he's going to drive it into the base that night. Our house happened to be on the way to the base, but he realized there was something very extraordinary about this wreckage. And he wanted my mother and myself to see this because he realized we'd probably never see anything like this again. So that's what he did. He diverted a little bit out of his way to our house, and he positioned some of the wreckage on the kitchen floor of our house, woke my mother and myself up so we could see what he collected out in the desert there. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts, very late in the morning. And he said, well, look at this. I want you to look at this now. I think this is parts of what they call, I think he said flying saucer. And that had a very special connotation, not knowing exactly what a flying saucer was, but I realized it was extraordinary, whatever. And he said the connotation was this came from outer space, from some other place. And the first thing he had us do was to look for some electronic components like vacuum tubes, resistors, condensers, or wires. There wasn't anything like that there. It was just like metal fragments, beams with strange letters or writing on them, and some black plastic material like a broken phonograph record would be at that time. And so I looked at it for about 15 or 20 minutes, and I didn't keep any of it. People ask, well, why didn't you keep some of it? Well, I couldn't because it was part of Air Force property. And some people say, well, your father broke security by bringing this highly secret stuff to your house, but it wasn't classified at the time. Classified later, but it wasn't classified when he brought it to the house. So he did not break security at that time. So from that time on, I realized that, hey, we're not alone. There's other guys out there, and what's more, they're far enough along the scale that they can get here from wherever they come from to look at us.
Just reposition myself. So, but then, that was when you were 11 years old?
Correct, yes. I was 11 years old at the time.
Okay, so, but then there was a time when you didn't say anything about this story at all.
Well, the reason for that is that after my dad displayed the wreckage to Colonel Blanchard, the base commander, he was ordered then to fly the debris to Fort Worth Army Airfield where General Ramey, who was the 8th Air Force commander, because they wanted him to look at this too. And at that point, they realized what they had. The General Ramey did, and the rest of the people there at the air base realized this was something that came from outer space or some other civilization. And my dad was at that time told not to talk about this, and furthermore, to tell anybody he knew that knew about this not to ever talk about that again. So that's why we kind of let the subject drop, because we realized that this was now highly classified, secure material, that we were not to talk about it, and we didn't.
How did that feel for you, living all these years with a secret like that?
Well, it didn't keep me from thinking about that. I didn't really want to disclose this to my friends, and I thought that, well, sooner or later, they will let this be released anyway. So, I'm not going to raise any ire by releasing the information sooner than it should be.
Okay, so that was in 1980 when the story came up again in the media.
Well, I think it was 1978. Stanton Friedman, who's one of the researchers in UFOs, got wind of the fact that my dad was at Roswell, and he had a very special story to tell. So Stan is the one who interviewed my dad, and at that time, this is some years later, after 47. So my dad said, "Well, why not start talking about it now?" And he did release the story to Stan Friedman, who then spread the word, and it caught on fire.
Okay, so how did the Air Force react?
Knowingly, or at least openly, didn't react at all that I know of. I know my dad stayed in the Air Force for some years after that. It did not hurt his military career. I mean, this is after 47. In 1948, though, 78, he was a civilian, of course, so it did not affect his military career at that point. But it didn't have any outward effect on him when he released the story. No threats or anything like that.
Okay, are you aware of any other people there in the region of Roswell that were victims of like threatenings of military?
I've heard of it. I myself have never been threatened in any way, shape, or form. I've gotten some strange telephone calls from people, but no threat content at all. And although some people state they have been or were threatened by whoever it was, not to talk about this, not to disclose this, but not me, though.
Now, there's so many evidence that shows that something happened there in Roswell. It's possibly two flying saucers that crashed there. What do you think about the alien abduction film that the Santilli?
Oh, I don't know. I recognize the possibility of this happening. There's certainly enough people. No number of people who say this does happen, but I personally have no knowledge of this myself, and I can only speak factually of what I know myself to be true.
You said that there were symbols on the...
Yes, on the in some of the wreckage there were some beams, like some structural members that had some symbols or some sort of writing on them, and that was the strangest part of the whole wreckage scenario. That what was this kind of writing? It looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics, or I don't know what it was, but I do have a representative sample of it. I did. Miller Johnson, who is an artist in Albuquerque, New Mexico, fabricated one of these beams from my description, and I have one here that would demonstrate what this looked like, and this is pretty much what this looked like. It was the beam itself was 12 to 18 inches long. The writing itself was kind of like a purple metallic violet hue, resembling but not really like hieroglyphics, but more like geometric symbols of different configurations.
So did you? Is that a recreation? Something that
this is a reproduction of that.
A reproduction, yes.
Not the real thing. I wish it was. Well, if it was a real thing, we wouldn't have it.
It looks like Egyptian.
Well, that was my first impression, Egyptian. But Egyptian hieroglyphics have animal symbols and things like that, which there wasn't any like that.
So what do you think? What those symbols mean there? What was their function?
Well, I wish I knew. It's maybe instructions for something. I have no idea.
What do you think would happen if the government would finally tell the truth about what's going on?
I don't think that there would be panic in the streets. I think people would accept what the reality of this is, that we're being visited or being examined by extraterrestrials, curiosity people. They're scientists, obviously, and they'd be very interested in creatures like ourselves who are, well below them on the scientific scale. In other words, not nearly as advanced as they are, but we're getting there. And they may be interested to see how far we're going to go, because at this point we may represent more of a danger to them than they to us.
Do you think that there's a possibility that it will change the whole perception of our world, like everything for mankind?
Yeah, well, for me, it's made it's engendered interest in astronomy and cosmology, because I realize that there's other systems out there which are inhabited by intelligent civilizations. For me, as far as my religious feelings go, it actually strengthened my faith that the creation is still there, and we're not the only ones.
My last question, what do you tell people who say that the whole Roswell story, that's all made up, somebody invented that in the 80s, and you're all liars? What do you say to those people?
Well, I just shrugged my shoulders. I was there, you weren't. I know what I saw, you didn't see it. And you have your beliefs, that's okay with me. I don't really care. It doesn't bother me at all.